Welcome to today's episode where we are going to discuss a very important part of the contract, which is investigations, inspections, and reviews. Now, most of you have heard about doing an inspection period. In our market, the standard is 10 days. Buyers can ask for more. They can ask for 15, 20. They could ask for a year. That'd be kind of dumb, but I do get some weird requests. Also, it's important to note that as a seller, when the buyer requests additional time, then it's really important to make sure that you document that and that you know that you're agreeing to it. For example, our standard Oklahoma contract just says if left blank, the inspection period will be 10 days. Now, what will happen sometimes is a buyer's agent will put in 10 business days, which now will extend it considerably, especially if there's any holidays in there. So you could actually be about 18 days into the contract, and unfortunately, those same buyer's agents typically put a very short window for closing. And the reason that can become a problem if you're 18 days into the contract before you know what the repair requests are going to be or to know if the deal is going to stick, but they've asked for a 35-day closing, that only leaves you about 15 days to wrap up and get out of the home. Not really super realistic in most cases, so something to be aware of. But what I think I wanted to chat about today, because I've had several questions recently, is just what kind of inspections is the buyer going to perform on your home or on your property? Because even if it's vacant land, this still falls into that category. They can still inspect. So Jill's like, really? Yes, you can inspect vacant land. There's many things that you may want to check with vacant land as far as just knowing what you're getting, especially if it was a lot, that's a little bit different, just a vacant lot. But if it's acreage, you may want to actually go out and walk the land and make sure that there's not any landfills, any junk piles, anything like that, or even just the topography will work for what you're wanting to do. One time I had a family member that was purchasing a vacant lot to build on. It looked relatively flat. There was obviously a little bit of a fall or a little bit of a drop, but it was a very, very large lot, little over an acre. And when they got their builder out, they found out that it was going to be at about $30,000 of dirt work. Jill's like, $30,000 of dirt work before they even started the home. So that was something that they checked out during their investigation period. So as far as inspections, what inspections can be performed? So I'm reading directly from the Oklahoma State, this is a GTAR, Greater Tulsa Association of Realtors contract, and it states that the buyer has the right to inspect based upon the disclosure statement and disclaimer statement. They have the right to inspect for flood, storm runoff, storm sewer backup, and water history. They have the right to check for psychologically impacted property and Megan's Law. Okay, so we've got a confused look here on Jill, so I'm assuming the rest of you may have that same look on your face. Psychologically impacted property is if something violent has happened in the home or someone has died in the home, and that would be a reason you would not want to buy it. Would you buy a home if that had happened?
I don't know.
She's not going to commit one way or the other. It's everybody's a little different, and I think it would depend on, was it a violent situation or
It was old age.
right, great grandmother peacefully fell asleep. Yes. So I've also had people specifically ask, was it in any specific room or did it happen on the front porch or in the front lawn? You know, like, well, did they call the ambulance and grandfather passed away going out the door? I mean, it's a little skeptical there, but you do have the right as a buyer to investigate that. Oddly enough, though, in Oklahoma, it is not a disclosure item. So what that means, if great grandmother did peacefully fall asleep and not wake up in your home, you're not required to put that anywhere in the disclosure. However, as a buyer, if it's important to the buyer, they can submit in writing asking that information, and then the seller is legally obligated to submit it back in writing. And the key here is writing. Make sure that it's all in writing. Just asking the realtor, hey, do you think anyone passed in this home? And the realtor saying, I don't think so. That does not cover you. It needs to be in writing. The second part of that is Megan's Law. Megan's Law is if there's a registered sex offender in the immediate area. Jill, have you ever checked if there's registered sex offenders in your... No.
My sister she's big on that.
Okay, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing because what I always tell young families, guys, it's not so much if they're in the area, because unfortunately there's a lot of that. But are they watching your child play every day? Are they watching you come and go? You know, can they see into your backyard? That's a little different than if they're a mile down the road. Just something to be aware of. And it's important to note again that you have to check that during that 10-day inspection period. Next is hazard insurance. Is the property insurable? Guys, this is becoming more and more important. We're running into several insurance companies that the home is insurable, but at an exorbitant rate. And unfortunately, we're not finding out about those rates. And this is not about an insurance situation, but a lender situation, because the lender is requiring the buyer to pay in excess of 3 months in advance on the day of closing. And that is making a big swing. I think the last two that we had were like a $2,000 difference that popped up just prior to closing. So is the home insurable? And in that same sense, is the insurance affordable based upon what the lender guidelines are, not necessarily a knock to the insurance company themselves. Next, environmental risks, including but not limited to the soil, the air, the water, hydrocarbon, chemical, carbon, asbestos, mold, radon gas, and lead-based paint. A buyer has the right to do any and all of those inspections. Now, I do admit that those are somewhat rare in our market. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do them. It just means that a lot of people don't do them. Also, because they are rare in our market, we don't have a lot of local inspectors who do those types of things. So we typically have to connect a buyer with someone from out of area. Next is the roof and making sure that the structural members, roof decking and coverings are covered. And then a general home inspection. And the general home inspection is what I like to refer to as just kind of an overview of the home. If you've hired the right home inspector, they are going to say to you, the structure feels sound, but if I were you, I would have an electrician check some of those electrical flags that I'm seeing, or the home feels sound, but maybe there's a plumbing question or a roof question. So then at that point, you can take it up a notch and get an additional. Then there's an actual structural inspection. So a whole house or a normal home inspector does not do a structural inspection. So if you're seeing jagged cracks, separation, different levels in the concrete, there's definitely some things you might want to consider having a structural inspection. And then fixtures, equipment, and systems inspection. Now this is heating and air, water heater, plumbing, that type of thing, to make sure that those big ticket items are working. And then a termite inspection. Now, what's important to know is the 10-day period also covers investigations and reviews. So the investigations would go something like this. I had a young couple one time, fell in love with this home. And they realized that there were only, it was at the end on a quiet street with a cul-de-sac. And after going into contract during the 10-day time frame, we were standing out in the yard one day and a very unique vehicle drove by, and the young lady got a very weird look on her face. And she then excused herself, made some calls, and then came back and said, I need to cancel this contract. Jill is like, ooh, tell me more. Well, the reason she needed to cancel the contract is she found out that her ex-mother-in-law lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. And her ex-mother-in-law would be driving by every single day, and the young lady just was not prepared to deal with that. So that was a very unique investigation, but that was an investigation. So yeah, I mean, we've had it where coworkers did not want to live on the same street. Exes, yes, yeah, we've had some really unique things there. So investigations, that is kind of investigating the overall general area and making sure that it's going to fit your needs. This would also apply to the school district. We've had situations where we had a school that was a half a block away. The house sat here, the school sat there, and the young couple found out that, and this was obviously a while back, but this was when the school lines were very, very specific. And even though they lived within a half a block of the school, the home did not sit within that school district. So that was a weird one. So those are reasons why you may want to cancel, or the reason why your buyer may cancel your contract on your home as a seller. Now, also reviews. Reviews fall into all of those categories, but I personally think reviews, the number one thing to know about reviews is, at the end of the day, what are your total costs all in? And what we've had happen is buyers were happy with the actual inspection, but after finding out all of the costs that would be part of it, they weren't aware that, you know, the filters on the AC unit were HEPA, and these were very, very expensive filters, and there was a filtration water system that was going to take some additional maintenance and upkeep. The homeowner's insurance was going to kick in based upon the flood status of the home. And there was one that was very unique where the home sat right outside of a fire district where the volunteer fire department had not done some things that they should have done, and so therefore the cost was just going to be exorbitant. And so by the time they got all of those fees and numbers together, it pushed them about $280 out of their comfort zone of what they thought the house payment would be. So investigations, inspections, and reviews during that 10-day time frame, it's really important as a buyer that you know. And for my sellers out there, it's really important that we provide as much documentation and as much information as possible to help them make this decision, because we don't want to get to 2 or 3 days before closing and the whole deal blow up based upon some information that has just now come to light. Yes, in most circumstances, they would forfeit their earnest money, but realistically in our market, most of the time the earnest money is less than $1,000, and now you've just lost 45 days on the market, and no one wants to do that. Not for $1,000. It's just not worth it. So knowing what type of inspections is really important. Now, on a lighter note, I don't know that it's a lighter note, but on a quirkier note, one of the investigations that I've been involved with was we had a buyer that needed to bring a shaman into the home to check the energy of the home. Yes. And that was allowed. They did it. Everything was great. We were able to close. But interestingly enough, another time we had a client request to be able to do a seance in the home. Yes, Jill is freaking out behind the camera right now. Now, the seller denied the buyer the right to do that. Definitely somewhat of a gray area, but the seller said, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And the buyer went ahead and purchased the home, and to this day still lives there. And maybe they're still doing, I don't know, maybe they're still doing seances, Jill, who knows? So this inspection period is definitely, can be a little wonky. I one time had a client cancel because they were into numerology. Are you familiar with numerology? Yeah, so numerology, they took the numbers of the house, like 14796, blah, blah, blah. And they add them together and then they do something with the moon phase, and it was not a good number. It was not a number that they were comfortable with, so they ended up canceling the contract. So there's lots of things that can go wrong during that 10-day inspection period, and as a seller, I really always encourage you to not celebrate too soon. Don't jump on social media and say, my house is in contract, we've got it sold. I think that that's probably the number one thing that happens is sellers assume that once they've accepted a purchase offer, their home is sold. Not true, not correct. A lot of things can go wrong. And it's a little awkward if you've gone on social media and said, we sold the home, and then they have a shaman come out and the energy's not good, and then people say, why is it back on the market? Okay, well, maybe that wouldn't happen, but just don't celebrate too soon, and know that there are, a lot of options for a buyer to enter the property with licensed individuals. And if they're not using a licensed electrician, but let's say it was a shaman or a priest that they wanted to bring out, then a licensed realtor would have to be present in the home. All of these things would be scheduled. People should not be just randomly showing up at your door. But on average, what we generally see is a home inspection, a termite inspection, and then some type of a survey or a mortgage report inspection, which is just the boundaries of the property. So if you are a seller, know to not celebrate too soon. Try to disclose as much information up front so that they have the information and it doesn't come as a surprise to them, because there's definitely that trust factor. A lot of times you can keep the deal together because you've already disclosed some known issues, and then when the buyer's inspector finds it, no one's surprised. You were already told about it. So as sellers, don't celebrate too soon. As buyers, know that you do have some options, but that 10-day timeline is really important to stay within, or you could end up forfeiting not only earnest money, but be responsible for some fees that the seller has incurred because you did not stay within the time frame. So as always, thank you for watching. And this was a question that we had, so I'm answering that. Please like, follow, and share. And if there's a topic that you would like for me to dive into, please reach out. We'd be happy to consider it. Thanks, everyone.